following or followed WSF. Only I think 3 WSF, World Social Forum, 3 or 4 maybe the Mumbai. But I have very 2-3 very short observations without any value judgment, just observations. It's true that the WSF gives a space which appears to be very open, appears to be welcoming to everybody. But my observation over the last, how many? 9 years, 2003 I attended first the Asian Social Forum, then over the last 8-9 years is many of these apparently very diverse groups are really not coming from those diverse initiatives. What I have observed at least is there is still a fair bit of dominance from the northern funding agencies, and the picked up people with picked up presentations come too often in too many fora. And I'm not talking about only in the climate space or other. I have attended a couple of human rights related discussions, a couple of land related discussions, large fora, and I seem to have noticed that same people, same groups funded by the same funding agency from the north have been coming and talking the same language. That's one, and that shows that the apparent diversity and openness that Vijay is saying, it is apparent, it's probably not as much as it is intended to be, or
in design it is intended.
In design. The second thing, because, and this has connection to the discussion theme of today, is one of the major slogan is another world is possible, and that implies that people come up with whatever they have lived, their lived experiences have alternatives, another world we are talking about. But in again many of these WSF discussions, what I have again, I am not saying that's actually what is happening, I am saying what I have seen, limited to that, what I have experienced in these 4 WSF that I attended, is most of the references to what should be the alternative, what are the directions, often refers to the very institutional frameworks. Like in most of the human rights related discussions that I attended, repeatedly, I am not again saying that that's bad, but people refer to UN Charter on Human Rights, UN DRAPES. Beyond that, there are very little in terms of substantive ideas. If you are talking about another world is possible and talking mostly about UN Human Rights Framework or UN Child Rights Framework or UN Rights on Indigenous People, UN Declaration, so that do not give an impression that we have explored enough in terms of alternatives. Connected with that, the other observation that I had seen, and my observations again, is that too many of the solutions proposed where we should go are becoming technocentric or market, like I think Tor also said, like the largest amount of discussion I participated in the WSF space is climate justice related. Apart from the dominance, as I said, of selected few, identified few, not selected, identified few big funding agencies and some 10, 12, 15. The trends, the directions are repeatedly coming into a very clear market oriented within the system, where we are talking about changing the system. Even in the climate space, we talk about changing the system and not the climate. But then suppose directional indicators are also largely market limited. I'm not saying, I wouldn't say market dependent, but market limited, mainstream. Very little of alternative ideas, either from concrete examples or as even proposed ideas which can be floated, which has not been tried, which can be explored, might not have existed anywhere. So this, in my understanding, is a limitation, and there is enough scope. I am connecting that there is enough scope probably, or should be, we should be happy that there will be people coming out with more alternatives, real alternatives, rather than what already exists in the global institutional framework. I am emphasizing on that, ending that, because most of the quote-unquote alternatives that are being talked about are within the existing global institutional framework, little outside that.
I think at least 2-3 kinds of things emerge from these conversations. One is, what are the spaces in the WSF structure as it is over the next few days which enable us to intervene or influence to move towards the alternatives. And these alternatives to the current system, not within the current system. So I think that point Soumya is very clear. That's more formal part. Whatever I'm not that familiar with the WSF structure, but whatever, like what Vijay ji mentioned. But the other, and I think probably more important space would be where we're simply meeting with other organizations, movements, people, because that space is available. Right? So whether it's in the workshops that we are organizing or being part of, or it's just sitting with somebody over a coffee or whatever. I think if we can also talk a little bit about what sorts of spaces of that kind exist, where again the search for systemic alternatives to the current system can be explored further. And then what ideas this gathering here might want to put forward to others who are at the forum in those informal spaces, or formal spaces, but not necessarily the forum's decisions or the forum statements, but within the forum, the sorts of the hundreds of things that are going to happen, and some of which we've heard. And again, I think here two things, just my thoughts on some of what you all have said. One is we all know that there's incredible stuff happening on the ground. What people are doing, right? Organizations, movements, individuals are doing in their own search for alternative ways towards sustainability, equity, justice, and so on. But the other, and I think what's happening one is this stuff, and then how do we know about this more, document it more, help them network more, understand them better, etc. But the second, and I think which is probably happening less, is what are these systemic alternatives? Where are they emerging from? Are we actually having dialogues amongst them? Right? So, whether it's Gwen Vivier from and so on, and the various avatars of that from South America, or it's parts of the degrowth movement from Europe, or it's ecological Swaraj from our part of the world, or it's others which are trying to say there are fundamental systemic alternatives. But is there enough of a dialogue happening amongst them? Is there some kind of a synthesis is a bad word because it sounds like we're trying to put everything into one. But is there a sharing which can then maybe help us to emerge with what are the common fundamental values and principles that we're all saying, okay, here's a future world which has to be based on these values, which will culturally look very different in different parts of the world, which will politically look different in different parts of the world, but at least fundamentally we share these principles or these values. So are there spaces available for the sharing of practical stuff, but also the sharing of worldviews and paradigms and frameworks which are systemic, really different from what we have right now? And then how much does the forum allow for that? Even what Soumya has said, I don't know if this is true, then how much does the forum allow for that is something we'll have to explore. So just a few thoughts here. And I
clarification on your last thing. There is no Politburo kind of high command of forum of allowing or not. Like we didn't take any permission from any high command. We are discussing what we want to. And
by allowing, I didn't mean that. By allowing, I meant are the spaces available for us to, and if they are, if there is really openness in that, including the point that Soumya is making, that who are the people there?
no,
Right,
that
so-
depends on us. No,
Sorry, Vijay. Who are the people there? Meaning who? By now, the people who are going to come are already here, or will be here. Obviously, we cannot now get other people who, for instance, maybe, like if Soumya is saying some of the kinds of people that we would have wanted here, it's too late to bring them. So, if we know the range of organizations, movements, people that are there, then what within that constraint or limitation or opportunity, what spaces are available for us to do this. So that's what I meant. I didn't mean allow in terms of somebody sitting up there saying, okay, you can and cannot do.
Look, there are two different levels. One is formal design, whether it allows or not. So the simple answer is yes, it allows. Period. The other is the givens. And politics is always a kind, potato that was, potato that will be. So art of possible. I already mentioned in an indirect way all the critiques which he has put forward. But if we forget World Social Forum, just think of India. Your book by both of you is the best example of trying to give out the alternatives in, and the good examples you have talked about, how marginal they are to the whole society, and and especially to the thinking of those who claim to be in the business of social change. So I am saying this, the predicament here is a reflection of predicament in our own countries. That is why I said, let us reimagine WSF in our South Asian context, have 200 districts of India, have 100 districts of Bangladesh, and so on.
I agree. I'm saying in the next 3-4 days. I'm not. That's a later part, which I think is a very good start. And we can this next 3-4 days, what opportunities are available for us to do both the understanding and the networking and so on of the fantastic practical
That's only what Soumya
initiatives.
said. Informal bilateral meetings.
Yeah, but I'm saying we can get more concrete
over
the next hour or so on this. And the second is the meeting of worldviews, paradigms, alternative worldviews, paradigms, concepts. Some very ancient ones, some may be very new ones. So what spaces can we have over the next 3-4 days for these two kinds of things? That's what I was optimizing. Todd?
Yeah. We have this space right now. There will be developing spaces all the time, and the question is, of course, how can this continuous learning process which is going on be used somehow in a way that could promote something. I think here we go are sort of too much in a defense position here. And I think, what's your name? Ashish. Are running too fast. I think it's important to note is that on the formal level there is a sort of a cultural structure in the whole thing which is problematic, which is sort of fragmented, I think. On the other hand, it's not as strong as it would be in the state-centric thing. I think Shomyo put it out fairly well, what kind of problem. If the space is there, there's still some sort of conditions which makes it very hard to get somewhere. But even if you look at the formal structure, there are different levels in the formal structure. Apart from the self-organized thing, there are the assemblies. So with other words, there is a sort of possibility to some kind of convergence. The reality is that this is of course bullshit, because to take concretely the climate thing, which seems to me to be the space where we can intervene in that double existing going on here, because you have one thing is the formal World Social Forum, the other thing is that actually people use this meeting like Simon Pu did yesterday, where suddenly key activists from the climate movement turn up, and BK and Campesina and so on. So and that was not World Social Forum.
Also World Social Forum.
Not yesterday.
Yesterday, it's World Social Forum and not Social Forum.
It was not Social Forum.
No, but for Social Forum, this meeting would not have been there.
That's exactly why I'm attacking this whole idea, because what is going on is an obsession claiming that that meeting yesterday could not have taken place without Social Forum, because of course there is another process going on the whole time, and that is exactly what you were talking about. At the village level, there is a lot of meetings in townships, etc., everywhere, and they are connected by popular movements directly, without the social forum. So there are two sort of processes, if we generalize very much, going on at the same time, where we have this closeness between Via Campesina and Francois, which took place yesterday. And that was not because of World Social Forum. So, and where you had the People's Global Action as a sort of expression of that, with the limitations it had. And there's always these kind of things going on. So with other words, if you can see that there is also other things, and the interesting thing is that the Paris meeting now taking place, which is also not outside the social forum. The thing is that if we are able to look upon this as not only one sort of social forum, that there is actually popular movements going on, there are these kind of Gandhian initiatives, etc., they intermix, which means that it's not, and now I come back to the words of all, it's not the final assembly of climate, which is important, because there will be 17 reports made, which means that it's not at all democratic, because it will not be able. So it's in the secret meetings to plan that meeting where the power is. That's where, because you have a limitation in terms of time space. Because I happen to, I've been on to One World Social Forum, but I know much more about these things than the people who've been here too much. Because I've been into these stupid international things, I don't think they are important even. I'm mainly into local struggle, but I've been to the UN Conference 72 and been following it since. So I know the game, which means I know these secret places. And more people have to learn it. So the best important place in this context of World Social Forum will be the climate space, the hours before the climate assembly. And the climate space is partly actually something outside social reform and inside at the same time. That's where the radicals are. And we met them yesterday at Monastir. So with other words, there's a sort of a game, and the whole game is simple, that Avas, everybody knows about 350.org and Avas.
Yes.
This new technocratic hallelujah thing. It's like Greenpeace, they pick the raisins in the cake, and they only do the kind of struggles where you can have the win-win solution. So they separate the dirty work from the nice, cute work. This is modern technology, and it's work. We have to learn how they do it. They got $20 million to organize the whole Paris thing. All just climate justice radicals are afraid like this, and they don't want to shove it them. So they've been giving up in advance for the whole picture. And then we have the climate space going on here, where the radicals are. I think it would be easy to make a revolution in this thing, but they don't, so this is the situation. But here we have the international possibility, by having the Monastir meeting, by knowing what the real climate justice movement is going on, how they do it at the local level in South Africa, where the teachers' trade union have united with the Friends of the Earth in South Africa, and the big trade unions for a just transition plan for creating 1 million jobs, which is exactly what we are trying to do in Sweden and in Denmark, etc.
Tor, can you be specific on how does 350.org, set apart of us, but so how is it that they are now co-opting this situation? I'm sorry, I'd like to be more specific on what you're saying. What's happening? That I'm.
What's happening is that the whole thing where WK actually started was International Climate Action Days 1991, 1992. This is written out of history. It was the mass Padyatra between Helsinki and Turku, in the Indian leadership of this. It was global justice, it was climate justice. And we organized, and when we organized it, we said it's your local conflict which decides the destiny of it. It's your struggle concerning emission, it's your struggle against deforestation. And then, you can write to that, you're only a politician, if you want. So we put the historical subject is the local actor in his local realities and his national realities, and then there's some kind of international thing going on there, right? And we had no money, it was before internet, we had more or less no money. There was, you have to send the mails out and you have to get them in to have, so that was the thing, and the rest was sort of, there was one person who had to do this shit work, And we were able to do this in 70 countries in 500 places. In Uganda, 32 towns planted trees, etc., etc. Now we negotiate with this Climate Action Network and all these big NGOs, including Friends of the Earth, and they totally wanted to destroy us. We were just a nuisance to them. We were completely stupid, and they didn't want to continue, and we had not resources to. Then, many years afterwards, the Trotskyists in the Socialist Workers' Party starts to organize the International Climate Action Days in 2005. They have, with the support of Greenpeace, etc. Their main idea is to destroy the climate justice movement, to have them to be the link to other issues, because they want the trade unions to be dominating in the trade unions. So they stopped the climate justice demands and put all these now in action, do something, dear world leaders. That kind of ideology the Trotskyists put forward. That kind of, you know, there are many Trotskyists. And they were not even able to mobilize more than we did in 1990 and 1992, in spite of the head internet and all the funding. And that has been going on. So the local mobilization on climate issues are in the hand of these Anglo-American bureaucrats. And now you have 350.org, and they do the same thing. They make it a technical issue, 350, everybody in the whole world have to learn the scientific thing, and they say we have to have a scientific basis, and now we have to tell the world leaders to do so. And then in the Anglo-American tradition you also, now we have to have mass civil disobedience. So they bring out the political content, and they say we have to be many. We will not have a radical, we don't do a political content, but we should have be many, and this is how the whole logistics in Paris will be carried out by these, and people accept it because with their money, people believe they can control the mass media, information, etc.
Okay, I think
but,
maybe this conversation
Yeah.
will take off.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, but just to get back to what we can do in the next few days.
And I just